The world has always been defined by money, not just by who prints it, but by who controls it. For over 70 years, the United States has ruled the global financial order with one weapon more powerful than its army, more influential than its diplomacy, and more feared than its sanctions: the US dollar. From oil markets in the Middle East to trade deals in Asia, the dollar has been the undisputed king of global finance. But today, something historic is happening. A quiet but powerful revolution is underway, one that threatens to dethrone the dollar and change the very foundation of the global economy. And at the center of this revolution are the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, now joined by new members like Saudi Arabia. Together, they are taking the boldest step yet. They are building a gold-backed currency designed to rival and possibly replace the US dollar in world trade. To understand why this is America's biggest fear, we need to step back and look at how the dollar became so dominant in the first place. After World War II, the United States emerged as the world's strongest economy. In 1944, at the famous Bretton Woods Conference, global leaders agreed to peg their currencies to the US dollar, which itself was tied to gold. For decades, this system gave Washington unrivaled control over world finance. Even after President Nixon removed the gold standard in 1971, the dollar's supremacy remained intact. That's because the US struck a historic deal with Saudi Arabia. All global oil sales would be priced and sold in dollars. This gave birth to the Petrodollar system, ensuring that every country in the world needed dollars to buy energy, the lifeblood of modern economies. But today, the foundations of that system are cracking. The BRICS nations, representing more than 40% of the world's population and nearly 1/3 of global GDP, are no longer willing to live under America's financial dominance. They are tired of Washington weaponizing the dollar through sanctions, trade restrictions, and financial blackmail. They are tired of watching their economies destabilized every time the US Federal Reserve raises interest rates. And most importantly, they are tired of funding America's deficits by being forced to use its currency for trade. That is why BRICS leaders are now working on something that could shatter the old order: a gold-backed currency. Imagine this. Instead of settling oil purchases in dollars, India could pay Saudi Arabia in a BRICS currency tied to gold. Instead of Russia selling energy in dollars, it could use the new BRICS currency. Instead of China trading with Brazil in greenbacks, they could exchange value in a system backed by something tangible, something real, something the dollar abandoned more than 50 years ago: gold. This is not just an economic shift. It is a tectonic, geopolitical transformation. For America, this is a nightmare scenario. Because the moment countries stop using the dollar for trade, the demand for dollars collapses. If oil, gas, and raw materials are no longer priced in dollars, then central banks across the world will no longer need to hold massive dollar reserves. That means trillions of dollars could flood back into the United States, triggering inflation, weakening the currency, and destabilizing the US economy. Washington knows this, Wall Street fears this, and the Pentagon is watching closely. Because a world where the BRICS currency replaces the dollar is a world where America loses its greatest weapon: financial dominance. But what makes the BRICS plan even more dangerous for the US is its link to gold. Unlike fiat money, which is backed only by trust and government decree, a gold-backed currency carries intrinsic value. Gold has been the ultimate store of wealth for thousands of years, surviving wars, empires, and economic collapses. While the dollar has been printed endlessly by the Federal Reserve, gold remains finite, scarce, and universally trusted. By anchoring their currency to gold, the BRICS nations are not just creating an alternative to the dollar, they are creating a safer, more reliable, and more trustworthy system for the rest of the world. The signs of this transition are already visible. Russia is selling oil to China in yuan. India is paying for energy imports from the Middle East in rupees. Brazil is trading with China in local currencies. And Saudi Arabia, the very country that built the petrodollar system with the US, has now signed deals with BRICS partners to trade in yuan and rupees. For Washington, this is nothing short of betrayal. The same ally that once guaranteed dollar supremacy is now quietly helping to dismantle it. And this time, it's not just Saudi Arabia. Other major energy players are exploring the same path. The United Arab Emirates, Iran, and even African nations are signaling interest in BRICS' alternative financial system. This is why the U.S. establishment is panicking. Because they know the world is not the same as it was in 1944. Back then, America was the only economic superpower standing. Today, the BRICS nations together represent a far larger share of global trade than the U.S. alone. And as Washington continues to weaponize the dollar against countries it disagrees with, more and more nations are looking for ways to escape America's grip. The BRICS gold-backed currency offers them that escape. Imagine the impact. A Chinese company wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. Instead of converting yuan to dollars, it pays directly in the new BRICS currency. An Indian firm imports gas from Russia, paying in rupees converted into the gold-backed system. A South African miner exports resources to Brazil, settling trade without ever touching dollars. Multiply this across hundreds of billions in trade, and suddenly the dollar is no longer at the center of global commerce. That's how power shifts, not with one dramatic announcement, but with 1,000 smaller deals that slowly erode America's dominance until one day, the world wakes up and realizes the dollar is just another currency, no longer the king. This is why the U.S. sees the BRICS move as an existential threat. If the dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency, the consequences at home will be devastating. Right now, America can print money at will because the world needs dollars. Every country buying oil, gas, or raw materials is forced to hold dollar reserves, creating constant demand. This allows Washington to run massive deficits without collapsing its currency. But if that demand disappears, so does America's privilege. Suddenly, printing dollars would trigger runaway inflation. Interest rates would soar. The U.S. government would struggle to finance its debt. Ordinary Americans would face higher prices, weaker savings, and a lower standard of living. In short, the loss of dollar dominance would be the economic equivalent of an empire collapsing. And the BRICS know it. That is why they are moving carefully but decisively. They understand that once the momentum shifts, it will be almost impossible for Washington to stop it. No amount of military power, no amount of diplomatic pressure, no amount of economic threats can force the world to keep using a currency it no longer trusts. And trust is exactly what the BRICS are offering. Trust in gold, trust in multipolarity, trust in a system not controlled by one country but by many. Already we see cracks in the old system. Central banks around the world are buying gold at record levels. Countries from Africa to the Middle East are signing trade deals outside the dollar. Even European allies quietly admit they are worried about overdependence on the greenback. The shift is happening. The only question is how fast.